Maria Thompson was a fighter. Every day, she woke up before sunrise, her mind already racing with the endless to-do list that awaited her. As a single mother of two young children, life wasn't easy, but Maria refused to let it break her spirit. She worked long hours at a local diner, serving coffee and breakfast plates to customers who rarely noticed how tired she looked. Her hands were always busy, pouring drinks, cleaning tables, or jotting down orders. But her thoughts often drifted to her kids. They were her reason for everything. At night, when the house grew quiet and her children were fast asleep, Maria would sit by the dim light of a desk lamp, poring over textbooks. She had enrolled in an online business administration program, determined to give herself and her family a better future. It wasn't easy balancing work, school, and parenting, but Maria believed that hard work could change her circumstances. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late nights and early mornings left her exhausted, and sometimes she wondered if all her efforts would ever pay off. One fateful morning, Maria's old car, a beat-up sedan that had seen better days, finally gave out on her. The engine sputtered and died as she drove to work, leaving her stranded on the side of the road. With no other options, she called a tow truck and arranged for the car to be taken to a mechanic. But the news wasn't good. The repairs would cost more than the car was worth. For Maria, this was devastating. Without a vehicle, getting to work, running errands, and taking her kids to school became nearly impossible. Determined not to let this setback defeat her, Maria decided to visit a nearby car dealership. She had been saving every penny she could spare, hoping to find something affordable, a reliable used car that wouldn't drain her savings completely. On the day of her visit, Maria dressed as neatly as possible, wearing her least-worn pair of jeans and a sweater borrowed from a friend. She knew she didn't look like the typical customer walking into a shiny showroom filled with expensive cars, but she hoped her determination would speak louder than her appearance. When Maria entered the dealership, the air felt different, cool and polished, with the faint smell of leather seats. Salespeople in crisp suits glanced her way but quickly turned their attention elsewhere. One man approached her briefly, asking if he could help, but his dismissive tone made it clear what he thought of her chances of buying anything. Another salesperson outright ignored her, focusing instead on a well-dressed couple examining a luxury SUV nearby. Maria tried to stay hopeful, browsing through the rows of cars and imagining which one might fit her budget. But as time passed, it became painfully obvious that she wasn't welcome there. Finally, unable to bear the humiliation any longer, Maria left the dealership without speaking to anyone further. Standing outside, she took a deep breath, trying to hold back tears. The weight of her struggles pressed down on her shoulders, but Maria reminded herself of one thing: giving up wasn't an option. She had faced challenges before, and she would face this one too. Little did she know, the events of the next day would bring an unexpected twist, one that would change her life forever. The next morning, Maria woke up with a heavy heart, but a stubborn resolve. She couldn't let yesterday's humiliation at the dealership stop her from finding a solution. Her kids depended on her, and she knew that giving up wasn't an option. Sitting at her small kitchen table, she sipped a cup of coffee while flipping through her notebook, where she had scribbled down ideas for affordable cars and financing options. It was then that she remembered something, a conversation she'd overheard at work about personal loans. Maria decided to visit her local bank. The thought of taking out a loan terrified her. Debt was something she had always avoided. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and right now, having reliable transportation felt like a matter of survival. With her heart pounding, she gathered her pay stubs, her savings account information, and the letter detailing her progress in school. If nothing else, she hoped these documents would show the bank manager that she was serious about repaying any money they lent her. When Maria arrived at the bank, she was greeted by a kind woman named Mrs. Patel, who introduced herself as the branch manager. Unlike the salespeople at the dealership, Mrs. Patel didn't judge Maria based on her appearance or assume she wasn't worth her time. Instead, she listened intently as Maria explained her situation. how her car had broken down, how she needed a vehicle to keep working and caring for her children, and how she was willing to do whatever it took to make things work. Mrs. Patel studied Maria's financial records carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a few moments of silence, she leaned back in her chair and smiled warmly. "You've got grit," she said. "I can see how hard you're working to provide for your family and better yourself. That counts for a lot." Though Maria's income was modest and her credit score wasn't perfect, Mrs. Patel believed in her determination. After some discussion, she offered Maria a modest loan, not enough for a brand new car, but enough to get her into something dependable. Relief washed over Maria as she signed the paperwork. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. On the drive home, she pictured herself behind the wheel of a sturdy used sedan, one that wouldn't break down every other week. She imagined driving her kids to school without worrying whether the engine would stall or making it to work on time without relying on unreliable public transportation. This loan wasn't just money. It was a lifeline, a chance to reclaim control over her life. That evening, after tucking her children into bed, Maria sat alone in the quiet living room, staring at the loan approval letter on the table. A mix of emotions swirled inside her: gratitude for Mrs. Patel's kindness, pride in her own perseverance, and a lingering anxiety about what came next. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she had done everything in her power to create opportunities for herself and her family. As she turned off the lights and climbed into bed, Maria whispered a silent prayer. "Please let tomorrow go smoothly," she murmured. She didn't know it yet, but fate had other plans. Tomorrow wouldn't just bring another trip to the car dealership. It would bring someone from her past, someone whose presence would shake up her world in ways she could never have anticipated. Little did Maria know, this was only the beginning of a story that would change everything. The next morning, Maria woke up early, her mind buzzing with nervous energy. Today was the day she would return to the car dealership, this time armed with the loan approval letter tucked safely in her bag. She dressed carefully, choosing her cleanest pair of jeans and a blouse that made her feel a little more confident. As she prepared breakfast for her kids, she reminded herself to stay focused. This wasn't just about buying a car. It was about proving to herself that she could overcome any obstacle life threw her way. When she arrived at the dealership, she parked her borrowed bike near the entrance and took a deep breath before stepping inside. The showroom looked just as polished and intimidating as it had the day before, with rows of gleaming cars under bright lights. But this time, Maria felt different. She clutched her loan documents tightly, ready to show them she meant business. Before she could even approach the counter, however, something extraordinary happened. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled into the lot outside, its tires whispering against the pavement. The car was unlike anything Maria had ever seen up close. Luxurious, commanding, and dripping with wealth. Her curiosity piqued as the driver stepped out. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and carried an air of authority that turned heads instantly. The dealership staff rushed to greet him like royalty, their faces lighting up with excitement. But what caught Maria's attention wasn't the car or the commotion it caused. It was the man himself. When he turned toward the entrance, her heart skipped a beat. It was Alexander Carter, her ex-husband, and the father of her children. The same man who had walked out on her years ago, leaving her to raise their kids alone while he chased his dreams of success. Maria froze, her stomach churning with a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. What was he doing here? Alexander hadn't noticed her yet. He strode confidently into the showroom, exchanging handshakes with the eager salespeople who fawned over him. Maria watched silently from the sidelines, unsure whether to confront him or slip away unnoticed. Before she could decide, Alexander glanced in her direction. For a moment, their eyes locked across the room, and time seemed to stand still. His expression shifted from surprise to recognition, and then something softer, guilt, perhaps, or regret. "Maria," he said softly, breaking the silence. He hesitated, clearly unsure how to proceed. Maria felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to storm out, refusing to give him the satisfaction of acknowledging him. Another part of her couldn't deny the curiosity bubbling inside her. Why was he here? And why now, after all these years? As Alexander approached her, Maria crossed her arms defensively, her jaw tightening. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of feelings swirling within her. Alexander stopped a few feet away, his hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets. I heard you were looking for a car," he replied, his tone hesitant. "I thought maybe I could help." Maria blinked, taken aback by his words. Help? After everything he'd put her through. The audacity of his presence stung, but beneath her anger, a tiny voice whispered, "Why is he really here?" Little did she know, this unexpected encounter would set off a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. Maria stared at Alexander, her mind racing as she tried to process his words. "Help," she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You think you can just show up here after all these years and help me?" Her tone was sharp, but there was no mistaking the flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. She had spent years building a life without him, piecing together scraps of hope and determination to keep herself and her children afloat. Now, here he was, standing in front of her like some kind of knight in shining armor, or rather, a billionaire in a Rolls-Royce. Alexander shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for the storm of emotions his presence had unleashed. "I know I don't deserve your trust," he admitted, his voice low and earnest. "But when I heard you were struggling, I couldn't just sit back and do nothing." He paused, searching her face for any sign of understanding. "I owe you that much, Maria." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, but Maria wasn't about to let him off the hook so easily. "You left us," she shot back, her voice trembling slightly. "You walked out on me, on our kids, because you said you needed space to focus on your career. Do you have any idea what it's been like for us? For me?" Alexander flinched at her words, guilt etched across his features. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "A huge one. Leaving you and the kids was the biggest regret of my life. I thought I could fix things later, once I'd built something, but by then, it felt too late." His gaze dropped to the floor, and for a moment, the confident billionaire seemed like a shadow of himself, a man weighed down by regret. Maria didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him, trying to reconcile the man standing before her with the husband who had abandoned her years ago. Physically, he looked the same, tall, broad-shouldered, with those piercing blue eyes that had once made her heart skip a beat. But there was something different about him now. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, or perhaps it was the genuine remorse in his voice. Whatever it was, it gave her pause. "You disappeared from our lives," she said finally, her voice softer but still firm. "Do you even know your own kids anymore? They're amazing, Alex. Smart, funny, brave, but they hardly remember you. You missed birthdays, school plays, bedtime stories, everything." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Alexander nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I hate myself for it. But if you'll let me, I want to make it right. Starting today." He gestured vaguely toward the dealership around them. "Let me buy you a car. Not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness. I know I can't undo the past. But because I want to help. Please." Maria hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. On one hand, accepting anything from Alexander felt like admitting defeat, like letting him erase years of hardship with a single gesture. On the other hand, she couldn't deny how much easier her life would be with reliable transportation. And yet, trusting him again felt impossible. Could she really allow him back into her world, even in this small way? Before she could respond, one of the salespeople interrupted, nervously clearing his throat. "Mr. Carter, we have a few options ready for you," he stammered, clearly eager to please. Alexander waved him off dismissively, his attention remaining fixed on Maria. The tension between them was palpable, drawing curious glances from the dealership staff. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of their shared history hanging heavily in the air. Finally, Maria broke the silence. "If I agree to this," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully, "it doesn't mean we're okay. It doesn't mean I forgive you. Got it?" Alexander nodded quickly, relief washing over his face. "Of course," he said. "I wouldn't expect anything else." As they began discussing details, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter marked the beginning of something far bigger than a simple car purchase. Whether it would lead to reconciliation or further heartache remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: her life was about to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. The air in the dealership felt charged, as if everyone present could sense the tension simmering between Maria and Alexander. The salespeople hovered nearby, pretending to busy themselves with paperwork or inspecting cars, but their glances kept darting toward the pair. Maria stood firm, her arms crossed, while Alexander leaned slightly forward, his expression a mix of hope and apprehension. "I don't want charity," Maria said firmly, her voice cutting through the awkward silence. "If you're doing this for show, to ease your conscience, then forget it." Her words were sharp, but there was no mistaking the vulnerability beneath them. She had spent years proving to herself that she didn't need anyone, not even him, to survive. Accepting help now felt like opening a door she wasn't sure she wanted to walk through. Alexander held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "This isn't about charity, Maria," he replied earnestly. "It's about making things right, even if it's just a little bit." He hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "Look, I know I can't fix the past. I can't undo the pain I caused you, or the time I missed with our kids. But I can start by helping you now. Please, let me do this." Maria studied him closely, searching for any hint of insincerity. His eyes met hers, unwavering, and for the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that he truly meant what he was saying. Still, old wounds ran deep, and trust wasn't something she could give lightly. "Fine," she said finally, her tone measured. "But on one condition: you have to spend time with your kids. They deserve to know who you are. And whether they want anything to do with you is up to them, not me." Alexander blinked, taken aback by her stipulation. Then, slowly, a look of gratitude spread across his face. "Thank you," he said softly. "You have no idea how much that means to me." For a moment, the walls between them seemed to crack ever so slightly, revealing glimpses of the connection they once shared. With the agreement settled, Alexander turned to the sales staff, who practically tripped over themselves to assist him. Within minutes, they were showing off sleek SUVs and family-friendly sedans, each more luxurious than the last. Maria watched silently, her arms still crossed, as Alexander dismissed model after model. Finally, he stopped in front of a brand-new luxury SUV, spacious, safe, and equipped with all the latest features. "This one," he said decisively, turning to Maria. "What do you think?" Maria raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by the extravagance of the vehicle. "It's nice," she admitted grudgingly, "but it's also way too expensive. I told you, Alex, I'm not looking for charity. It's practical." Alexander countered smoothly. "Plenty of room for the kids, great safety ratings, and it'll last for years. Trust me, Maria, this isn't about showing off. It's about giving you something reliable." He paused, adding quietly, "Something you deserve." Maria sighed, torn between pride and practicality. She hated the idea of accepting such an extravagant gift, but she couldn't deny that the car would make her life infinitely easier. After a long moment, she nodded reluctantly. "Okay," she said, "but only because it's for the kids." As the paperwork was drawn up, Maria found herself stealing glances at Alexander. He seemed different from the man she remembered, more grounded, perhaps, or maybe just older and wiser. There were moments when their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, It felt like they were back in a simpler time, before the weight of their mistakes drove them apart. But those moments passed quickly, replaced by the reality of everything they had endured. By the time the transaction was complete, the sun had begun to set outside, casting golden light through the showroom windows. As Maria prepared to leave, keys to her new car in hand, Alexander stepped closer, his expression tentative. "Can we talk more?" he asked. "Maybe grab coffee sometime. Just catch up." Maria hesitated, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to say no, to protect herself from the risk of getting hurt again. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, wondered if maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of healing. "We'll see," she said finally, her voice soft but non-committal. As she walked away, Alexander watched her go, his mind racing with thoughts of what might come next. Little did either of them know, this chance encounter was setting the stage for changes neither could have predicted. Over the next few weeks, Alexander wasted no time making good on his promise. True to his word, he began reaching out to spend time with his children, his kids, as he now thought of them, trying to reclaim the connection he had lost. At first, Maria kept a close watch, her guard firmly up. She wasn't about to let him waltz back into their lives without earning their trust. But Alexander seemed determined, showing up consistently and putting in the effort. He started small, taking the kids to the park on weekends, helping them with homework, or simply sitting at the kitchen table during dinner while they chatted about their day. The children, now 7 and 9 years old, were cautious at first. They barely remembered their father, and the initial encounters were awkward. "Who is this guy again?" Their youngest, Lily, asked Maria one evening after Alexander left. Maria knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "That's your dad," she said gently. "He wants to get to know you better." Lily frowned, unsure what to make of that. Her older brother, Ethan, was equally skeptical but less vocal about it. Still, over time, curiosity got the better of them. When Alexander brought them ice cream after a long day at school, or when he cheered wildly at Ethan's soccer game, tiny cracks began to form in the walls they had built around their hearts. Slowly, tentatively, they started to open up. For Maria, watching this transformation was bittersweet. On one hand, she was grateful that her children were finally getting to know the man who should have been part of their lives all along. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the fear that Alexander might disappear again, leaving them even more broken than before. Every smile he shared with the kids, every laugh they exchanged, felt like a double-edged sword, hopeful yet fragile. Alexander, for his part, threw himself into being present. He took the kids to amusement parks, where they screamed with delight on roller coasters, and to museums, where they marveled at dinosaur skeletons. He even helped Maria around the house, fixing a leaky faucet or assembling furniture she'd been struggling with for weeks. These small acts of kindness didn't go unnoticed by Maria, though she tried not to read too much into them. "You don't have to do this," she told him once when he stayed late to repair a broken shelf. "I want to," he replied simply, his voice steady. "It's the least I can do." Despite his efforts, Maria remained guarded. Their conversations were polite but distant, filled with careful words and measured tones. Yet there were moments, fleeting, unguarded moments, when something deeper surfaced. Like the afternoon they found themselves laughing together over one of Ethan's silly jokes, or the evening when Alexander lingered on her doorstep, hesitating before saying goodbye. In those moments, Maria caught glimpses of the man she used to love, the man who had once promised her forever. It confused her, stirring emotion she had buried long ago. One Saturday morning, as Alexander arrived to pick up the kids for a trip to the zoo, Maria surprised herself by inviting him inside for coffee. The gesture was small, almost casual, but it carried weight. Sitting across from him at her kitchen table, she realized how much he had changed. Gone was the restless ambition that had driven him away. In its place was a quiet humility, a desire to rebuild what he had broken. "You're different," she observed, sipping her coffee. From the man I knew before. Alexander nodded, his gaze thoughtful. I had to grow up, he admitted. And losing you, it taught me things I didn't want to learn. About love, responsibility, family. His voice softened. I'm sorry, Maria. For everything. Maria looked down at her cup, her throat tight with emotion. Forgiveness wasn't easy. It never was. But she could feel the walls around her heart beginning to shift. Maybe, just maybe, this second chance wasn't just for Alexander. Maybe it was for her too. As the days turned into weeks, an unspoken understanding began to take root between them. They weren't rushing anything, nor were they pretending the past didn't exist. Instead, they focused on the present, the laughter of their children, the warmth of shared moments, the fragile hope of something new. Whatever lay ahead, they were willing to face it, together, step by step. Months passed, and the bond between Alexander and his children grew stronger with each passing day. Ethan, once hesitant to even speak to his father, began seeking him out for help with school projects or advice on soccer strategies. Lily, who had initially clung to Maria during their outings, now giggled uncontrollably whenever Alexander made silly faces or told corny jokes. Watching them interact filled Maria with a mix of emotions. Joy at seeing her kids happy, relief that Alexander was finally stepping up, and an ache she couldn't quite name. It felt like watching fragments of a broken mirror slowly being pieced back together. Alexander's efforts weren't limited to just spending time with the kids. He started taking an interest in Maria's life as well, asking about her studies and encouraging her dreams. When she mentioned struggling to balance work, school, and parenting, he offered to cover daycare costs temporarily so she could focus on her final exams. At first, Maria refused outright. It felt too much like accepting charity. But eventually, she relented, realizing it would allow her to graduate sooner. Just until I finish my degree, she insisted firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. Her graduation day arrived on a crisp spring morning, the kind where the sun shines brightly, but carries a gentle breeze. Maria dressed carefully in her cap and gown, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. She hadn't told anyone except close friends and family about the ceremony, assuming Alexander wouldn't be interested. So when she walked into the auditorium and spotted him sitting near the front row with Ethan and Lily, her heart skipped a beat. He caught her eye and smiled softly, giving her a small nod of encouragement. As Maria crossed the stage to receive her diploma, she glanced toward her family. Ethan waved enthusiastically, while Lily clapped loudly, shouting, "That's my mom." But it was Alexander's expression that stayed with her, a look of quiet admiration tinged with something deeper. Pride, regret, maybe both. Whatever it was, it stirred something inside her, a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in years. After the ceremony, Alexander surprised her by presenting her with a bouquet of flowers. "Congratulations," he said sincerely, his voice warm. "You've worked so hard for this. I'm really proud of you." Maria accepted the flowers, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Thank you," she murmured, unsure how to respond. The gesture was simple, yet it carried weight. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine what might happen if they gave each other another chance, not rushing into anything, but building slowly, step by step. Over the following weeks, their relationship continued to evolve. They began meeting regularly for coffee, talking about everything from their childhoods to their hopes for the future. These conversations revealed sides of Alexander Maria had never seen before: his insecurities, his regrets, and his genuine desire to make amends. In turn, she opened up about her struggles, sharing pieces of herself she had kept hidden for fear of judgment. Slowly, trust began to rebuild, brick by fragile brick. One evening, as they sat together on Maria's porch watching the sunset, Alexander turned to her, his expression serious. "I know we can't erase the past," he said quietly, "but I want us to move forward, together, not just for the kids, but for us. If you're willing." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Maria hesitated, her heart racing. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still scars that needed healing, wounds that ran deep. But looking at Alexander now, the man who had fought so hard to prove himself, the father who adored his children, the partner who wanted to start over, she realized something important. Love wasn't perfect. It was messy, complicated, and sometimes painful. But it was also worth fighting for. "I think we can try," she said finally, her voice soft but resolute. "But we take it slow, okay? One day at a time." Alexander nodded, relief washing over his face. "One day at a time," he agreed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Maria felt a sense of peace settle over her. They weren't rushing into anything, nor were they pretending the past didn't exist. Instead, they were choosing to face the future together, not as strangers trying to reconnect, but as two people determined to build something beautiful from the ashes of their mistakes. And for the first time in a long time, Maria believed it was possible. The months that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding, forgiveness, and rediscovery. Maria and Alexander took their time, navigating the complexities of their renewed relationship with care. They didn't rush into anything, not labels, not promises, but instead focused on creating moments that mattered. For Maria, it was about seeing consistent effort from Alexander, proof that he was truly committed to being part of their lives. For Alexander, it was about earning back the trust he had shattered, one small gesture at a time. Their bond deepened in unexpected ways. On weekends, they started taking family trips together, picnics by the lake, hikes through wooded trails, or visits to local festivals, where the kids gleefully spun around on carnival rides. These outings weren't perfect. There were still awkward silences and moments when old wounds surfaced. But what made them special was the effort behind them, the shared laughter, the quiet conversations, and the unspoken understanding that they were choosing each other, flaws and all. Ethan and Lily flourished under the newfound stability. Having their father actively involved in their lives gave them a sense of completeness they hadn't realized was missing. Ethan began excelling in school, his confidence boosted by Alexander's encouragement. Lily, once shy and reserved, blossomed into a chatterbox who loved telling her dad about her latest art projects or classroom adventures. Watching her children thrive brought Maria immense joy, but it also reminded her of how much they had missed out on over the years. That thought sometimes weighed heavily on her heart, but she pushed forward, determined to focus on the present. As for Maria, she found herself growing in ways she hadn't anticipated. With Alexander helping shoulder some of the responsibilities, she was able to dedicate more time to her studies and career aspirations. A few months after graduating, she landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm, a role that allowed her to use her degree while learning the ropes of the industry. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start, and every success felt like a victory earned through sheer determination. One evening, as Maria sat at her desk updating her resume, Alexander walked in holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Thought you could use a break," he said, setting one cup beside her. She smiled gratefully, leaning back in her chair. "Thanks," she replied, sipping the warm drink. The room fell silent for a moment, save for the soft hum of the ceiling fan above them. "You've come so far," Alexander said suddenly, breaking the quiet. His tone was thoughtful, almost reverent. "I don't think I've ever met anyone as strong as you." Maria chuckled softly, shaking her head. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "There were days when I thought I wouldn't make it. Days when I wondered if I was doing enough for the kids, or for myself." She paused, looking down at her hands. "But I kept going because I had to. Because giving up wasn't an option." Alexander reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. "You inspire me, Maria," he said quietly. "Not just because of what you've achieved, but because of who you are. You're brave, kind, and relentless. I'm lucky to have you, and the kids, in my life." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes, but she blinked them away, unwilling to let emotion overwhelm her. "We've both changed," she said finally. "And maybe we can keep changing for the better." That night marked a turning point for them. They decided to take their relationship to the next level, not with grand declarations or elaborate plans, but with a mutual agreement to face whatever came next together. They weren't naive enough to believe everything would always be smooth sailing. Life had taught them too well that challenges were inevitable. But they also knew that love, when nurtured with patience and respect, could overcome even the deepest scars. Years later, as Maria stood watching her children play in the backyard, with Alexander by her side, laughing at one of Lily's jokes, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Together, they had built something beautiful, a family rooted in forgiveness, resilience, and hope. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly have its twists and turns, Maria knew they would face it side by side, ready, willing, and stronger than ever.